Comments towards the presenter? Anything anyone would like to say or discuss? Feel free to do so.
One of the things that I related to very closely within your talk, which speaks a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, is this idea of identification. And this identification. I'll speak for myself as a successful businessman, or identification for myself as a spiritual personality, and it was really always the biggest challenge for me, and still are, in relating to the titles and the quote-unquote benefits that each one of those personalities brings to the table, and one of the things I've been seeing through self-inquiry in this group is really, this road is going to lead to forsaking everything that I believe. In the belief in myself, or this personality, a successful businessman, or a spiritual man. Because the easy ones to give up are the weak ones, right? The things that are easy to get rid of. That's the weak personality, the insecure person. So thank you for that. It's beautiful.
I got caught up in Mark's excitement and see him speak beautifully, and I see Mark changed from when he got here a few years ago, and it's beautiful to see.
How long have you been here, Mark?
5 or 6 years.
What do you suppose, Jeff?
Well, first, thank you, Mark, very, very much. Your words and also the energy. I was thinking much earlier in the evening about reward systems. And what I mean by that is that I suppose that each of us develops, probably from infancy, sets and types of rewards that we seek out, and that our personalities are perhaps almost in an evolutionary sense developed to best achieve those rewards. Some of them are romantic, some of them are fiscal, some of them are material, some of them are spiritual. And so I was thinking about, if you take that old saying that what nurtures us kills us, and that the rewards are nurturing those personalities that are departures from maybe the essential self, as you called it, then maybe it's useful in self-inquiry to take a look at those sirens, as you called them, the poison apples in all the Disney allegories, and that's a useful way perhaps to discern and differentiate between the personalities and the essential self, is by looking at the rewards that you see. Some of them might be the ones that are sought by the true self, so I don't mean to suggest that the seeking of rewards is necessarily indicative of falseness. But throughout the evening, I've thought quite a bit about this notion of trying to identify the rewards and which parts of myself are seeking them. What will that tell me? They're my mirrors. That's what I was thinking.
Along the line, destiny had to present things for you to choose from, things for you to see, things for you to experience. You didn't wind up in this room by accident. A lot of effort went into putting together a man who could wind up here. didn't happen by chance. More and more each day, I find myself more prone to defining the events around me, my existence, the people around me, as none of it having to do with accident. All of it is some influences I can understand, some influences I can't understand, some influences frighten me. I learned the meaning of possession. We've been using the idea of personality. This personality does this personality does that, this personality speaks here and there. Convenient. Personality is fine. To me, it speaks, the idea of personality is like the idea of the rational, the idea of the scientific approval that Dr. Freud sought so much and Dr. Jung did not seek. For instance, if someone says, gee, I can't stand that, we would turn in true training and say, well, that's a personality has just spoken. These days I'm more inclined to believe that there is a being inside the man I speak to or the woman, and that for a moment here or there, many moments here or there, we are possessed by different entities, and that these entities, I no longer am satisfied with seeing them as psychological characteristics. I see them as beings from one sphere or another who have entered the minds of people and make them perform, make them do. I do not believe that I or a man is being spoken through personality. I think that they are entities, and that entities have very, very much ease in entering into a human mind, a human being, and settling there for as long as they will, and getting them out by working on yourself, your characteristics, as we've been doing, is one way. I no longer believe that that's the only way or the best way. The entity that has taken possession has to be dealt with in terms of a removal, like they say in the Catholic Church. Any Catholics around?
And the exorcism.
Exorcism.
In the Gnostic texts, when they discuss that idea of exorcism, it's about doing away with false personality. I mean, it's one way of reading.
Make a notation to send me that in email where that part is.
In the Gospel of Thomas from the Gnostic liturgy, Jesus says, "You must bring forth what is within you. If you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what is within you will destroy you."
Everyone knows that I had a real rough life as a kid. Everyone knows. In my past, I had never thought of what was given to me by this life. Sometimes it's been said, well, gee, you're the guy that's can't be stopped, or is brave, or is this or that. I would think at first hand that these educations came to me from the South Bronx. But I realized with a sense of truth that they weren't from the South Bronx. They were from people who were around me, from entities that were in the communications my mother made, that many qualities were the hopings and yearnings of my parents, who on the exterior wanted more than anything, my son the doctor, my son the lawyer. But in subtle ways inside, in the communications, in the connections with spirits, I was pretty much trained and brought up to be what I am and to do what I do. Because these days I see more and more and more flashes that I know are pieces of my present life that are pieces of other lives. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me in a place that's indescribable. I remember my mom being alone. My father was working nights. Being alone in East Harlem. My birthplace was 111th Street, First Avenue, Lexington Avenue, El Barrio. And somehow I know now that I knew then. I am 3 or 4 years old. I must protect my mother. I am her guardian. I am her defender. That there's a piece of me that accepted this role in life. I am the defender. I would have made a hell of a New York cop, but that got screwed around. Like the animals around me. This isn't just my animals, it's the deer that come and they're all over the place and they're very young these days. Something inside me without words says, I am the defender of this life. I must defend all beings that reside and come and dine on these 3 acres I have, and I will stop anyone from hurting them. And it isn't like I'm going out to go out and say, sir, you shouldn't be here or you shouldn't be hunting. No, it's a lot different. I am not just a collection of personalities that I struggle to put in and put out and help around. I am a collection of spirit entities. From that viewpoint, many, many things changed. Yeah. Those that knew Jaja, we lost her this week. became my role to be the defender of this little doggie with her smile and her this and that. I told myself as soon as the event happened, I don't understand, and I'm not going to think clearly because this is so jarring to me. But the question always remains, what did I learn from this being? In my imagination or in my mechanizations, that being came into my life to teach me something. As I look back through actual history, I picked that little being out of a picture from a breeder's catalog. That's the one. Send me this little doggie. It's so easy for me without any kind of, what am I thinking? No, it is that easy for me. I must defend everyone in my life that I have decided is going to be part of my life. That is my function. I must defend. And I've had these ideas since I'm a little boy, 3-4 years old. That's part of my function. A tribe of upstanding people. In this tribe, financial, worldly, political success means absolutely nothing. Zero, zilch. There's only one question that I ask, and that I think the only question that people should ask to each other. Can I trust this person? If a person can be trusted, they should be defended with our lives. If they cannot be trusted, that's very unhappy circumstance. Once we were 6, now we're 5. The spirit of gravity in the form of death has entered my world. I am simply not prepared to sit back and say, okay, that's the way it is. I will be attacked again by spirits, beings, and demons that I've been attacked with for quite a while. We'll see what happens, but what did I learn from that little creature? Something that could not have been taught to me any other way. Is it possible for a little 3-pound creature to be a stand-up creature? What I call a stand-up mensch. Yes, it is. Size means nothing. Can I trust a little 3-pound creature absolutely with my life? Never a sign of betrayal, hesitancy, never, never, never. She was my partner. What spirit is in me that wants what I want? My grandfather was a man born in Spain. He served in Puerto Rico. He was town marshal for quite a few years. A rather frail, skinny man. His picture, he's an old man. I think he's carrying a .46 caliber or something. It reaches from his belt to his knees. He was the law in San Germán. It was his function to keep the peace and to keep people civil. My mother said he had a manner, a way, eyes. That gun was never used or drawn to a person. He would simply go over to you and say, please, stop what you're doing. And people simply did. That man was the man that my mother adored. And she made it her business that her offspring should be a lot like that. I understand. I want each person to think in terms of when you're doing this or you're doing that. I know you're going to say, well, it's my negative personality or my cheapskate personality or my Lothario personality, who knows. Do yourself a piece of work and ask yourself, what being is dwelling inside your heart that presents you with the images and ideas that you have? What being dwells in your heart? A being, not a psychological description, that makes you the way you are, that puts that love of offspring in you, which not that many people have. Yet you have it. Easily to you. You didn't have to learn it, you didn't have to do anything about it. Boom, there it was. You saw her, she saw you, bam, done. What spirit is that lives inside you? From what person? Is it a person from this life? Is it a person from another life? Is it a creature? Is it an animal? Mind you, at this point, I still understand the idea of the personalities within the human psyche. I'm presenting now that personality is just a more timid and acceptable word for spirit possession. Somebody out there speak.
I like this idea. It's, I have to admit, personalities for a while hadn't really sat with me, and I hadn't seen them as personalities, and I didn't know what to think about when people spoke about personalities. This idea being presented, at a glance makes a lot of sense to me. And at the beginning of the discussion tonight, there was a sentence spoken by the chair that said, not to look through our neighbor's eyes at what we want at our heart through our neighbor's eyes, but through our own eyes. And I think that, I know from my experience, I feel I'm very possessed a lot of times by looking through a neighbor's eyes. And it does feel much more like some sort of possession than the psychological part of myself. It's very strong, and it feels as if my whole body and mind is out of control. So I welcome this idea, and it does make a lot of sense to me.
Think about it. Ask yourself, what is that? Why do I suddenly want an ice cream in the middle of the night? See what it is. Yes?
I've always seen it the way you're describing it this evening. It's always the way I've reconciled the idea of personality through work terms, because the first way I ever read it described was to say that it covered one's soul. And in my mind, a soul was covered, or in my heart, a soul could only be covered by a false entity, an entity that did not belong on top of the soul. And perhaps it was a Catholic upbringing and the way that I instantly put it together. That was the way I always viewed this idea. So when I came across it, reading Gnostic text and some Egyptian writings as well, I'll have to
It
go
was
back.
Mr. Gurdjieff who sent us those texts.
Right.
I don't know how many students there have been, I guess thousands and thousands. I never heard this from anybody else. I never heard that anybody picked up his words. When they asked him, what are you teaching? He said, esoteric Christianity. Well, no, where's that from? Read the early Christianity. I never heard anybody else that did it and said it. But I did.
Maurice
Had to.
Nicole, I mean, Nicole does in the Mark, I think, make an attempt to take the modern Gospels and break them down to something more bearable, and more symbolic. But I think that there was, for me, always a sensation when I used to use drugs and alcohol, that it wasn't the sensation when I was on the drugs and alcohol, but the following day is that I had inhaled or consumed a demon. And it would take me days to get the voice of negativity out of my head. When I got sober, it took a few years for those voices to stop having any validity. They seemed to be able to re-enter. But I remember the first time I ever heard them was when the drugs and alcohol entered my life. So it's not an alien idea to me.
I first heard of Allan Kardec when I was maybe 3 years old. My mother used to take me to spirit seances every week for years and years. Always the book of Allan Kardec was there being read from on the table. Never struck me as strange. As a kid, I never said, what is that? I did say, what is that, when I saw a baseball game. What the hell is that? God, they forced me to go to one as a gift from the Police Athletic Society. I sat there and said, oh God, let me out of here, this damn thing will end. I never went to another one, never watched another one. But chains rattling in the night, spirit possession, oh yeah, that I know very, very well.
Whether it be entities, personalities, or thought, what comes to me, it's really less about the word than how I feel. And the feeling of whatever context you put it in, how you relate to that. And how I relate to it is something that needs to be observed and it needs to be recognized. And if it's not observed and recognized, whether it be thought or personality or entity, it controls you. So it's this idea of awake or asleep, are you in control or you're not in control? And then that's how I feel.